Welcome back. There's a call for the current child support grant of 460 Rand to be increased by a further 125 Rand. That's the move from a Cape Town non-profit organization, the Children's Institute. It says the current grant is below the food poverty line as the country marks Child Protection Week. And that's why we're wearing the green ribbons you've been seeing, all of us here on eNCA since the beginning of the week. Now, to discuss this call, we're joined now via Zoom by senior legal researcher at the Children's Institute, Paula Proudlock. Ms. Proudlock, good afternoon. Welcome to the Midday View. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of what's behind your call, the amount that you are calling for the grant to be increased to, I understand, is at the lower side or lower threshold of the poverty line. Shouldn't you be aiming a little bit higher?
Well, Dan, you know, in the context of what's happened this year, we are making a small ask. So government cut R1 billion from children this year, and they took that away from poor children and from orphans. So the child support grant, which is started off with 450 Rand in February this year, was only increased by 10 Rand to 460 Rand. It was supposed to be increased to 470 Rand. But that was cut from a 20 Rand increase to a 10 Rand increase. So the first thing we are asking for is that very small 10 Rand increase.
Okay, but the poverty line is around 580 or so. That's the number I see. I've seen 560 being used as well, but I've seen 580. Couldn't you at least go there?
Oh, yes. We are asking, and many other groups have been asking for many years, for the child support grant to be pegged at the food poverty line, which is 585 Rand per person per month.
And that's your call now, still? You're still calling for that?
Yes, that's still our call. That's still our call, and that's also the call of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, the AU Committee of Experts on the Rights of the Child. It was also recommended by a panel advising Treasury on how to mitigate the VAT increase. So there are many, many groups calling for that increase to 585. But actually what government did this year is took steps backwards from getting there. So not only did they not even increase with food price inflation, they have no intention of getting all the way to 585.
Yeah, I mean, food price inflation. We saw the other day that the affordability index from Pietermaritzburg, about 300% food inflation since last year, since over the last few months. So it's very high, and 460 is nothing in the bigger scheme of things. So how are you going on about urging the government to consider your request?
Well, the Children's Institute and the Centre for Child Law made a submission to the Standing Committee on Appropriations 2 weeks ago in Parliament, in the hope that Parliament would persuade Treasury to add that extra billion just to do the 10 Rand increase. Parliament has the power to do that. But we would be very interested to see if Parliament ever uses that power. They've never used their power to actually amend the budget or to reject the budget. So National Treasury tabled a very austere budget that cut money for poor children and orphans, and we were calling on Parliament to address that cut. And while we're calling for the grant to be increased to the food poverty line, what we were doing 2 weeks ago was just saying to Parliament, don't go backwards. Don't cut this very small grant even further, which is what they've done.
Yeah, and they're meeting this afternoon, thanks to ESCOM, who stopped load shedding because they requested to meet because they got a number of appropriations bill to discuss, and hopefully one of them will be this one that will enable children to get a little bit more, although it's already been cut. If they don't, what's next for you?
We will continue to lobby and advocate for that increase in October. And we will also, with all our partners, continue to lobby and advocate for the increase to at least the food poverty line. The ideal would be an increase to the upper bound poverty line, which is 1,200. But in a context where government isn't even willing to make a 10 Rand increase, asking for a 50% increase on the grant is not likely to happen. So we're asking for that 10 Rand increase in October, and we're asking for it to be in the short to medium term increase to the food poverty line. I don't know if you're also aware, but government also cut a grant that was supposed to be introduced this year for orphans who are living with relatives. So that grant, which was going to be called the Child Support Grant Top-Up, is to replace the use of the foster care grant for orphans living with relatives. But what they did is they started to reduce the foster care budget. So they'd taken the grant away from orphans, and then they didn't increase the child support grant budget to enable the rollout of the top-up to orphans.
Sometimes you just wonder.
Very regressive move.
Yeah, sometimes you just wonder.
In a context when families are really struggling.
Yeah, and it's like you're sacrificing social welfare. You're sacrificing social welfare at the altar, so to speak, of austerity, if there's such a thing. It's a little bit regressive. But thank you very much. We'll have to wait and see. Good luck to you, Ms. Proudlock, with the Children's Institute. We'll have to wait and see what Parliament will do this afternoon, if that extra 10 Rand will be granted as a child grant, a small increase, currently sitting at 460, which is still nothing. I mean, the minimum baseline of poverty line in South Africa is said to be 585 Rand. If you're a government of the people, and you have people's welfare at heart, and the people elect you into power, you'd at least try to meet their minimum needs. I think the biggest solution to all of this is my view, is for the country to embrace a universal basic income grant for adults aged between 18 and 59, those who are unemployed, and that must be the top end of the poverty line, which is over 2,000 Rand a month, and this country can afford that. Then you cut these big fat salaries of these MPs and the ministers and all the cars they drive and all the bodyguards. Take the money from there, give it to the people. That will make sense in my view. Well, I was speaking just now to the senior legal researcher at the Children's Institute, Paula Proudlock.